Welcome to the Coffee House Writers Podcast. I am J Bryan Jones. This episode is brought to you by the letter W, available in the alphabet now. Alright, let's get started. Thank you for tuning in wherever you may be. I hope you are well. I am well. I had a great conversation with Eric von Mizener. He is the Vice President of Coffee House Writers Group. We had a great talk about works of the past, critiquing in general, and some interesting tidbits about his life. We all went through things that made us writers. We all changed. Most of us didn't plan to become writers from the earliest age, although some of us did. You guys are the lucky ones. I didn't always plan to be a writer. In fact, I went to the University of California, Davis, with a degree in animal biology. That's when I went in for Bachelor of Science. That's what I ended up getting. I wanted to be a wildlife biologist, specifically a bat biologist, which I actually was, however briefly. And then for reasons I won't get into now, I had a moment where I needed to rethink my career path, and I guess in an existential sense, my life as a whole. So I made the change. I do discuss later in a podcast my process of becoming a writer and moving to Los Angeles, first moving to Echo Park, then moving to San Pedro, where I live now. And I don't know why I didn't see me going down this road sooner. As a kid, I really loved creating. I did things that I figured that what I did as a kid, everybody else did, and maybe they did. I don't know, but I created, the first thing that I remember creating was a picture book for kids when I was a kid called, I think it was Blue Rabbit. I remember the rabbit was blue. So Blue Rabbit and Little Duck. Or no, Chick. It was Little Chick. And I remember the chick was green and he had 5 red spots, just like a die. And he would get made fun of for it by the other barnyard animals in their school. It's kind of a distant memory now. But I remember making stuff like that, and I remember playing action figures with my little brother, 2 years younger than myself. Great guy, very creative guy. He's doing a lot of creative things now. He has his own YouTube channel. He goes by Razor13. You can follow him on Twitter if that's your prerogative. And what we would do is make these action plays with our figurines. And I also did, in fact, stop motion films with my best friend in elementary school. His name was Matt. I would go to his house and we would act out with whatever we had, stuffed animals or whatever we had at the time. So you just may never know where life may lead you. And then when you get to where you end up being, sometimes you could look back and realize maybe this is where you were meant to be all along. And now let me lead you into the interview where we go over the very interesting life of Eric von Mizener. Been on radio or television at 6 o'clock in the morning live?
Yep.
What was that like?
Lack of sleep, need for caffeine.
Why were you there?
Oh, that was when I was doing the Cayman Islands Film Festival.
Cayman Islands Film Festival. Nice. What was your role with that?
I was the executive director.
Uh-huh.
And a few times doing our promotions, we'd be on the morning show there on the island.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a surprising experience because coming from LA, there are millions of people and nobody knows anybody. You're on the morning show in Cayman. You walk out of that studio, everybody, hey, Mon, I saw you this morning. People you don't know, they all know you.
That's cool.
It is.
How long did you live there for?
Well, I commuted from the Inland Empire back and forth to the Cayman Islands.
Okay.
which was an interesting experience. I was on planes a great deal.
Yeah, that's quite a bit.
Yes, and did that for 3 years.
3 years.
Yep.
Oh gosh. Do you have an aversion to flying now, or is it just like second nature to you?
I don't mind flying. I do have an aversion to cram-packed planes where you're 3 rows over from someone who hasn't showered in several days, and the scent is just going everywhere, and they're probably traveling and all that sort of thing. But it's still, those things can get annoying at a point.
Yeah.
But you do meet some interesting people when you're crammed in there.
Yeah, I will strike up a conversation with someone I'm sitting to not every time, but every now and again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and hope the cute girl comes down and sits next to you if you get down earlier. And you know, I've never successfully come away with a phone number from a plane.
Most I ever got was a kiss, and was disembarking the plane.
Oh, from someone
Yep.
Someone you didn't know, or someone you were
Someone I met on the plane.
Someone you met on the plane, right? Okay, yeah. So you were not lying with your biography part that I read. You're a little bit of a player.
That's not the term I prefer.
Okay.
Though in retrospect, I do use the term bad boy.
Bad boy?
At
okay.
the time, I didn't view it that way at all.
Okay.
A little cognitive dissonance going on.
Some of the people, when they hear that and they look at you, they're like, oh, okay, what happened? Where's the tattoos? Where's the Harley? Where's the Harley shirt, right?
Which is funny. I'm writing a script right now where everybody's on Harleys. Well, all the good guys are on Harleys. All the bad guys are on Ducatis and other things. But I've never ridden one in my life. Don't know if I could. Never ridden anything bigger than a moped.
Oh, okay. I have never ridden a motorcycle. I do see the appeal in Los Angeles, though.
Oh, yes.
Just going through the traffic and everything.
And as far as traffic to our listeners out there, I am from Moreno Valley, which is 74 miles east of L.A., and I know it's exactly 74 because that was the commuting distance between Moreno Valley and USC when I was attending there. Jay's studio is in San Pedro. Down here at the port, you see all the cranes and the bridges and everything else down here. Coming from Moreno Valley, I feel like I just drove to Catalina. Over the water and everything.
Yeah, so did you have to cross the Green Bridge over there from Long Beach?
I don't know if I had to, but my GPS had me do it twice. Why? I have no idea, but it did.
Yeah, I could actually see it out at the kitchen window right now. I drive over it every week to go to Long Beach over to the critique route down there, to which you have been several times.
Yes, I was there for several months when we got it rolling.
Yeah.
And
thank you
that's
for your part in
the
that.
first
Yeah.
time I've ever been on that bridge, and the second time I've ever been on that bridge. I don't know if I'll ever be on it again. We'll see what happens with my GPS on the way out.
On the way back, yeah. So you were in Long Beach for quite a few months. That's when you and I got to know each other at the beginning.
Yes.
And I didn't know you were on the board at that time. You are vice president on the board?
Last April. For some reason, I don't know why, the board voted me vice president for the Coffee House Writers Group, which I've been part of since, 2010, 2011, really actively since 2011. And I guess a familiar face just sounded like a good idea.
Okay. And you said you were active. I guess you were part of Coffee House Writers Group before you were active in it, right?
I wasn't regular. I found Coffee House Writers Group while promoting another event I was doing.
Oh, yeah? What event was that?
I'm an arts commissioner with the city of Moreno Valley. And every year I do the Writers Launchpad each March. And I bring in different writers, novelists, nonfiction writers, screenwriters, for dummies books writers, all kinds of people to help people get a sense of the publishing industry, the different types of writing, what they're doing. Sort of like a couple of breakout sessions at a writers conference. And I was promoting that, so I was looking up all the different writers groups on Meetup. So I went to Coffee House Writers Group with a bunch of my flyers. And of course, Christine, who is the most bubbly person you will ever meet, she kind of sucked me in. She also came to the Writers Launchpad that year, and which I think helped to suck me in.
Okay. Did you bring any of your Moreno Writers Launchpad writers with you, or was it just you?
To Coffee House?
Yeah, the Coffee House.
My friend Steve Hilton, I've known him from high school, and coincidentally, he moved a block from me there in Moreno Valley, and we're now both on the Arts Commission there. He is, but he's not active with Coffee House. He is more active with the California Writers, which meet at the library there in Ontario, and I think he's vice president of that himself.
Okay, cool. You're a pretty connected guy, all things around. One of the more professionally interwoven among us.
One of the most important things I found, and I'm not always the best at doing this, but it's very important, networking and just keeping in contact with people. At several of the Writers' Launch pads, we have had Graham Brown speak. And he has come in from Arizona on his own dime to do this, which is extraordinarily kind of him.
Oh, yeah.
Now, most listeners, they may know him as the co-writer of Clive Cussler's Numa series of thrillers. When I met Graham, I was at the Hawaii Writers Conference, and we were just two guys there at the conference and the workshops, like any two people at any writers' conference. Neither one of us had a novel published or anything like that. In fact, he was looking at screenwriting at that time. Since then, he had 2 thrillers published. Clive Cussler, classic story, picked one up at the airport, read it on the plane, told his agent, hey, get hold of this guy. I want to talk to him, see if he'll be one of my co-writers. And it's that sort of thing. Some of the people, Jim Bruner and Elizabeth Stevens, I got to know them doing the film festival. And that's way back in the 90s. And Jim, he wrote most of he wrote Invasion USA, Delta Force, all of those films. And you keep in touch. It doesn't mean you're going out to eat every week, but you keep in touch with people. And that's how these things happen. And when you have something or they have something, you might call them, they might call you to be involved in different projects. And that's important for writers. Sometimes it goes a little cold, but people still remember. I know one super agent.
What's a super agent?
One of the more famous agents, usually through their blogs and their speaking, and so they get to be very well known. And I know one whose website is listed by Writer's Digest as one of the top websites for writers and all this sort of thing and all.
Okay.
I won't say the name now because I haven't gotten permission or anything.
Okay, right,
They want to deny they ever knew me.
This agent that got bitten by a radioactive spider. Go on.
I could actually see that. Yeah. But met them when I was in my 20s at college doing video work and this sort of thing. Worked on some other projects. They went their way, I went my way. Later on, sent a project proposal to them. And the great thing is, I got a response 20 minutes after I sent the initial query email.
Nice.
Exactly. Asked for the full proposal. I sent it. Turned me down.
Oh, well, has that proposal ever came into anything? Or became?
It has been redone and remorphed into what's becoming my memoir.
Okay.
Because life took some unexpected changes from what I was working on. So it all worked out for the best.
Okay.
And the reasoning had nothing to do with the writing. In fact, I was asked if I had any fiction work or anything. Said the writing was great, the proposal was great, but lacked a platform, which is that naughty word writers hate to hear.
Platform like your own blog that's helping to launch it?
Or with 3 gazillion hits every week, or I guess they measure it by month, or you're going around speaking, or you have a radio show, a TV show. Basically, platform means your ability to sell the book without the publisher having to sell it for you.
Yeah, I tried that with my own popular arts blog, Living Meet It. Never really amounted to anything. And pretty active, long hiatus from it. I'll pick it up sometime, but now it's just not the right time.
I understand. I'm currently on a hiatus from my blog, which I ran for a while. But some famous bloggers, Michael Hyatt, Jeff Goins, they did several blogs or on different subjects until they finally found what worked for them and for their audience. Mm-hmm. So it's also a matter of persistence. You might stop for a while, but keep going.
Have you found what works for you and your audience?
Apparently not. Because I am on hiatus at the moment. And that's the one thing I'm really looking for is that particular niche. I can do a wide range of subjects, lots of things I'm interested in. But there isn't a large audience of people with that same wide range of subjects of interest. We'll have partial interests in common, but not the same wide range. So it's best to keep it narrow, and that way you'll get all the people who are interested in X or in Y. and I need to stop hitting the table. It registers on the mic.
And from you, I've heard 3 different types of things. The first thing that I ever heard you read was a poem, as one of our members said at the time. I remember, like, she said she was so turned on right then, or like needed cold water, something to that effect. I remember who it was. I won't call her out though.
Any idea which poem that may have been?
Oh, it was like romantic. It wasn't like erotic, but it was something that you read in Long Beach when you had a little extra time at the end, that sort of thing. And then the second thing I heard you read was the introduction to your memoir, and then the third thing was a script. So you have three different types of media. Did you have any more?
I wrote a novel.
You wrote a novel, okay.
Unpublished. It's that famous first novel that will sit in the desk drawer forever. But it was 94,000 words of fabulous practice. And characters I simply adore. I love those characters. I'm not sure how they all feel about me, but I really love those characters. And I said it in a situation that current events have changed in a way. That book wouldn't work now on the market. Mm-hmm. But it was a terrific experience.
Why wouldn't it work now on the market?
It deals a lot with gay pride and a character who gets unsuspectingly pulled into the gay community and into a lesbian relationship. And things have changed so much on that since I first started that work in the 90s and did most of the work on it, that it's simply, a lot of it doesn't make sense.
Okay,
it's very much a period piece.
Oh, so it's like not really relevant to our times, I guess, anymore?
Not anymore.
Okay. So it wasn't like because it was politically incorrect now or anything like that?
It's probably politically incorrect at any period of time.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, that's something I definitely... I don't try to be politically correct. That's not what I would use, but I would definitely like to... even promote's the wrong word. But just be more conscientious of creating a diverse range of characters, mm-hmm. and make sure that I don't have any mixed messaging in there, if I do have messaging.
Well, for me, the characters were diverse. At that time, it was pushing the envelope. But what is politically correct or not is constantly, I guess the new word is, evolving.
Right.
So you're always going to get something wrong. And you can't worry about that as a writer. You just have to say if it's your narrator's truth or your character's truth, whoever's POV you're in mm-hmm. telling the story, it's their story.
Right.
It's not that bigger story of what the world says they should be, unless mm-hmm. that's part of their conflict.
Yeah, like you can be telling the story of someone who, from perspective, is a racist, mm-hmm. Or they go through some sort of journey, like Huck Finn. Huck Finn, he goes through the range of racism, and even when he like overcomes like the racism and tears up the letter and says, "I'll fine, then I'll go to hell," he still like thinks of Jim as being white on the inside. So he still has some really inbred racism that's hard, he can't get rid of.
The interesting thing is, because I think that is the great American novel. Anyone who wants to write the great American novel, forget it. Twain already did it. He did some of those things, I think, in part. It shows the inbred racism of the period, mm-hmm. but it also made it palatable for his audience. He didn't hit them over the head saying, "You're wrong."
Right.
He snuck them in the back door of saying, "Look, Jim's the brightest guy in the book." Huck is slowly learning this, and his eyes are slowly opening to that fact, mm-hmm. that the whole world is upside down, but he takes them in such a way that they don't see what he's doing. I think it's absolutely brilliant.
Very nice. So I have here, looking at some of the pieces you've done, and there's quite a bit of poetry. What got you into writing poetry?
Probably all those Shakespeare plays my father took me to as a child.
Do you remember which ones they were?
I think just about all of them. Maybe not Titus Andronicus. I don't think we saw that one. It may have been a little bloody. My father ran a Shakespearean theater when I was small.
Oh, wow. What was that like?
I don't really remember it because I was small, but he did that for several years, and the house was filled with Shakespearean costumes, which provided for Halloweens and Ren fairs for years. And we'd go to Shakespeare plays in the park, which they did back then in Monterey Park, and all these different things. When I was 7, we did a family trek. My parents were incredibly brave. They took 5 children with them on a month-long trip to Europe. without an itinerary. We went to Stratford. We saw all the great places Shakespeare was and everything else. So I was indoctrinated in this as a child. And so I wrote a lot of drivel.
Drivel? What?
Pure drivel.
On the road?
Poetry.
Oh, okay.
Like any art or craft, it takes practice. Practice. You do it, you do it, you do it. You know, even if you're knitting, you don't do a perfect sweater your first time you pick up those knitting sticks or whatever they call them. It takes time. It takes practice.
Oh, yeah.
And I look back at a lot of the early stuff, and I'm like, oh, boy. Yeah. I wrote teen angst when I was a teen. The stuff people at poetry readings cringe at, but it's a process we all tend to go through.
Right. Did you start by, like, maybe taking Shakespeare and making it into your own sort of thing? How inspired were you from that?
Not much.
Not much?
Not as practice.
Did your dad ever put you in one of the things?
No.
No? You weren't Puck or anybody?
No, I did do high school drama.
Okay.
My big role was the Reverend Dr. Harper in Arsenic and Old Lace. I think there's 35 lines or something. Like any actor, I counted my lines.
All right. You have some
career.
You have some presence. I feel like you could be a stage actor.
Well, there's a few years between that and now. I found that I absolutely loved being on the stage.
Yeah?
I also discovered the audience did not share in that experience. So I left that and I turned more seriously to writing, which I found I did have some facility for. And I wrote some stage things I don't even have anymore in high school. I wasn't very disciplined at it. But I started writing. I picked up some books on it and different things. And that's how, by 18, and a lot of good fortune, I sold my first script.
Right. Yeah. To The Incredible Hulk.
The Incredible Hulk with Bill Bixby. Yes.
That's pretty freaking awesome.
That is pretty freaking awesome. Yeah. And at the time, I'm 18 years old, and I got an ego that was so big, if you had double doors, you need a shoehorn on either side to get my head through it. It expanded so large.
Right.
I was not ready for that kind of success, but nonetheless, they asked me to write a second hour and make it a two-parter.
Okay. Wow, they must have been pretty impressed with you at the time. Were you...
They were impressed. There was talk, I was told, of putting me on the writing staff. Oh. My ego was absolutely enormous, and I cashed that second check, which was 3 times the size of the first one, because this time Universal Studios was coming to me. And then CBS stepped in and said, nope, you're canceled. And that was the end of everything. Was
it the ego that did you in?
It would have.
It would have?
You see a lot of young celebrities, whether it's in music or film or athletes, and you see the trouble they get into. I thoroughly understand that. I think the greatest blessing to me was that cancellation. I was not at all emotionally ready for that kind of success. The ego I got at the time proves it. It stayed with me for years because that gave me the confidence to know I am good enough. I can do this.
Right. Yeah, I know. For me, that thing that said I was good enough, I could do this was my honorary mention on the very first story I submitted to Writers of the Future contest.
Exactly. You get that acknowledgement, you go, wow, I can do this. I am good enough. I have the capacity. And from there, you just keep doing the work and doing the work.
Oh, yeah.
Because a lot of hard times will come as well.
Yeah, and like I've grown since then. Haven't gotten another honorary mention, which like I don't know if that's saying they think I'm moving backwards. I feel like I'm moving forwards.
And you probably are. It's just I've been a judge and I've been an editor on literary journals, and you will sit in that office. Everybody goes through it and they make their notes or their scores, however it's adjudicated at that particular contest or publication, and then you get together and say, okay, what are we going to publish? And it's more fun than watching boxing matches or something.
Oh, yeah?
Because you get into some real fights over what should be in and what shouldn't be in. Editors don't agree. It isn't there is one, oh, this is good work. No, there are people who hate Twain. There are people who hate Chaucer or Shakespeare or any other. I don't care for Nora Roberts. But millions of people buy her books.
Yeah, I mean...
It just doesn't speak to me. but it speaks to them.
Twilight sold how many copies? And how many of us hate us? How many of us hate it?
Yeah, I never even picked that up. I did read one paragraph, and it was painful, of 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh, yeah. Some of those lines you see on the internet, like, her face was as red as the Communist Manifesto or something. Like, what is
Something
that?
like that.
What is that?
And to those of us who are trained in writing, but it's obviously speaking to a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, there are other things that go into it, marketing, and you got the publication, but that only goes so far. But like publishers say, they don't know what's going to work. They just take their best guess.
Right.
And what speaks to people moves and what doesn't speak to them. And sometimes there are books that, and this happens in film too, they flop when they come out. And a later generation discovers them, and they become classics. Van Gogh.
Van Gogh, yeah.
Couldn't sell a painting to save his life. He's one of the greatest artists of all time.
Yeah, people will fly across the ocean in part to see his works.
They will. They'll have a reproduction or a print on their own wall, but they will make that trip just to see the original in person and look at those brush strokes from his own brush and his own hand.
Personally, I like to be valued in my time.
There's a certain value to that, but you can't give up just because you're not getting that validation at the moment. If you know what you're doing is good, good. Listen to editors, listen to the feedback. That doesn't mean you have to take every comment, because it's like those editorial rooms. We all disagree on what we like, and that's a good thing.
Sure, yeah. I know there's some, everybody really loves War and Peace, Leo Tolstoy.
Yes.
And I could not get, I read the first part. It's separated into parts. I could not get past it. I might try again someday. But it's just like, he says the princess, and then he'll say the princess again with no context, and he's talking about a completely different character. I can't get through it.
The Russian works are not very transparent. You have to really work. They demand a lot of the reader, and it's not easy. Take the Brothers Karamazov, and there's some glorious stuff in there. But you need a scorecard. You need your cliff notes. You need all of this going in because...
Your family tree and...
Yeah, you need all of that with the Russian works. Because they're not sitting there spoon-feeding it to someone whose other choice is Gilligan's Island. They had a committed reader back then. Somebody sat in a chair in the parlor or wherever they were in the house, and they read aloud, and the rest of the family sat around. That was the evening's entertainment.
Oh, yeah, and a lot of them they came out in newspapers or things like
serials,
that.
Yeah.
And they try to make it as long as possible so they can get paid as much as possible.
Dickens did that. That's why some of his works are so long. He got paid by the word on these serials. And the longer they ran, the more he got paid.
Yeah.
If you look at The Christmas Carol, which was printed as a one-off, it was not serialized. It's a very thin book.
Right. And
he went straight to the story.
And then for today, people I keep seeing on the blogs over and over and over, short is the new long. People see those old stuff and they want to emulate it, but a lot of it is just, they're classics because they really worked well at a time before us.
They worked well, and you have to know your audience. Their audience is so different from our audience. When Dickens or Twain or Tolstoy, when they were writing, people, if they were inland, we're here at the port. You see the bridge out your window. At that time, somebody in Kansas City or somewhere deep inside of Russia or something, if you're describing a boat, they'd never seen one. Not in their whole life. They'd never seen an ocean. Somewhere they may have seen an artwork depicting it. Maybe. But they'd never seen one. They had no idea how these things worked. You had to create that entire scene. What is it like at the ocean? What are the winds like? What is this wood and how everything works? Moby Dick, why does he go into all that detail of the whaling vessel? Because this was foreign to people.
Right.
A modern audience, if you say, okay, he was on a 3-masted schooner, okay. We know, even if you don't know a schooner from a man of war, you still know, okay, it's a wooden ship. It's got 3 masts on it, whatever.
Sure.
And the modern audience, we've seen these in the movies, on television, on the computers. We have this visual familiarity, even if we've never been to the sea. So you don't have to paint that picture. You just give that one-off line. He lived in a green Victorian. You don't have to describe the whole house. We go, oh, okay, and the details might follow later if they're pertinent, but our audience doesn't need them. Their audience did.
Yeah, and that's something that the pulp writers really needed to work at back in the days where everything was a Western or took place in China or the desert, and, you know, have those classic things which are parodied nowadays.
Yes.
That, like, I can't speak for all the Pulp Fiction writers, but L. Ron Hubbard I'm pretty familiar with. He traveled around the world, I guess, to help with his craft and crafting all these out-of-place things.
He did. Well, he was fairly respected. He published in Writer's Digest. He had articles on the writing craft, and he was at a certain level. He was never one of the greats.
Just as a writer.
But just as a writer. Yeah, he reached a certain level of
he was pretty good
success and respectability.
Yeah. He's not a household name. I hadn't really heard of him before I decided to become a writer. I hadn't heard of him at all before that. But I've heard of all of the people that I had to read in high school. I heard of other people who were just plain popular.
Right. Yeah, he wrote mostly science fiction during that great pulp era when we got so many of the classic writers. And I love the classic science fiction from the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s. His work has not stayed. Now, I don't know if that's been hurt by the whole Scientology thing. It may have.
Probably.
Yeah, because you can't really separate the man from that.
He is definitely he has one of the more strongest, fervent followings, you could definitely say. Passionate followers. You know, like we have the elections going on right now. I won't compare him to somebody else who has very passionate followers, but you get what I'm saying.
I do, but that's largely because of the philosophy. Ayn Rand. She has a following, but it's more because of the philosophy than it is because of the writing. Now, in a few hundred years, maybe even only 100 years or 50 years, we'll better be able to separate the writer from the context and judge them better. But right now, it's still too soon.
Yeah, and then, so for you, what philosophy do you come out with as a writer? Do you think you have one?
Philosophy towards the writing, or a life philosophy that comes out through the writing?
The second one.
That has shifted over the years, and I think with any writer, it continues to evolve as we grow and mature. Of course, at a time back in the 90s, my so-called bad boy days, the novel was more about sexual liberation and all of that, and that's where I was at the time. Now, I'm more into my faith, and I think that comes through more. It doesn't change some of the things. I certainly don't believe, and I know some people think, oh, he's into faith, he's going to want to judge people who are doing what he did. No, that's not the thing at all. But I've gotten older. I'm looking at the grave more. I'm closer to it. I can see that. I'm in my 50s.
You still get around okay?
I get around okay. I get around extremely well, considering I couldn't even feel my legs after I got hit by the truck.
Oh, so that's why you bring the cushion around with you.
That's why I sit on a cushion everywhere I go, and that's just because of the injury. Saves me a day of pain.
Makes sense to me. I know if there was just something I could walk around to help my back constantly, that those things that they strap around you, it's always for the lower back, but that's not what hurts on me, so...
Right, and someday you might write about that.
My back pain?
Exactly. It might be, or use that as a character, or in a character, or any of those things. I like to incorporate things from my life into my characters.
Oh, absolutely. Even people I've met recently into a novel that I'm rewriting now, someone that I met at work inspired a major character aspect of one of my main characters.
Yeah, well, even early on, my Incredible Hulk, I had one of my comic villains, and they were rather comic. I had a scene, he's riding around in this Jeep, he's standing up in the back, holding onto the roll bar. Well, I just pulled that because I had done that like a year before.
Okay, sure.
In one of the crazy moments of my life. I go, oh, wait, I can have him doing this and doing... And you just pull from these things, and if they work for the character, that's great. If they don't work for the character, don't force it.
Sure.
But these are things that we can easily sprinkle in. We don't have to think, oh, what is all this and that? No, just take the exciting things from your life. They work.
And
they're part of the toolbox.
And did you feel like you knew Bruce Banner pretty well? You're a good Hulk fan? Or do you just, like, this is a place where I can write?
It was the only TV show I saw. That's why I wrote for that one. That's why I chose that to write a spec for. Smart kid, dumb kid. I usually led with dumb kid. Yes, I sold a script at 18, but I was a father at 17.
Oh, okay.
And my young daughter liked to watch The Incredible Hulk. She was watched by her great-grandparents who babysat when her mother and I would go off to school, and we couldn't afford a TV in our apartment, but every Friday night she liked to watch The Green Man, as she called him. So that was the one show I saw, and I studied it, and I learned what happened during each act at each point. You know, he turns into the Hulk at the end of Act 2. At the beginning of Act 3, he turns back into Banner, and he talks to some friend he's made in whatever location and explains the whole Hulk thing. Every single time. That was their format. So I made sure to follow their format and work my story into it. So when they got the script, this was something maybe with a few adjustments, but they could take to set. And I learned that from reading David Gerrold's book on how he wrote for Star Trek with the trouble with tribbles. And I emulated what he did, and it worked.
Right, and I know you have mentioned in group before The Wizard of Oz. And so is that something you like try to bring to your movie scripts? Just what you see from that and what works, and it's pretty tight as far as the rules are concerned.
The Wizard of Oz is a brilliant film for how everything is constructed, even though it seems to break some of the rules, especially the "it was all a dream" thing, which is that's a can of worms.
Yeah.
But some of the things they do are absolutely brilliant. You can look up on YouTube just the scene where the Wicked Witch of the West first appears in Munchkinland. That whole scene is maybe 3 minutes. And you get everything about your villain. Her motivation, well, her sister's been murdered as she sees it. You know, to Dorothy, it's an accident. To the Wicked Witch, this was murder, flat out. And it's proven by the shoes. You killed my sister and stole her shoes, which are rightfully mine. That's my inheritance. So Dorothy's made an enemy, but you get the Wicked Witch's, you know who she is, her relationship to the other characters, her role in this world, her motivation for everything she does in the rest of the film. It's absolutely brilliant.
Being named the Wicked Witch doesn't hurt either, though, right?
Well, that tells you something about the character right off from the point of view character and the people she's associating with. But
I wonder if she calls herself the Wicked Witch. If that's just the other characters.
They never say in the film. They never give her a name.
Oh, do they?
Not in that film version, no.
Oh gosh, I need to look at that again. I would be blown away if that.
Only Glinda gets a name.
Right. That's right.
And she got moved. In the books, she was from the other direction. I think she was from the south in the books, and the shoes were silver, not ruby. But it's a color film, and early color film, so they were going for all the color. And Margaret Hamilton's portrayal of the Wicked Witch was beyond brilliant, because that was the first true movie villain. Long before Darth Vader or any of these supervillains, she was a progenitor of all of them.
True movie villain being like the amalgamation of evil and, I guess, not just an antagonist.
Exactly. Yeah, she embodies everything. And it's not just somebody with an opposing, your mean co-worker that you can't get along with. I mean, they're minor antagonists, and sometimes the antagonists are friends of the protagonists. They don't mean to be the antagonists, but they are, in their own way, blocking the progress. A villain, let alone a supervillain like the Wicked Witch, it's not accidental. It's like, I am your enemy, and I am going to stop you and kill you and fry you up in a pan. Or I'll catch you on fire, or I'll melt you with water, or whatever it happens to be.
So did you end up studying that film at some time?
I studied it over years. I can't say early on I sat down and did an exact study. But it's one of those films, I saw it from a child every year on CBS. They ran that, and that was an event.
So was it more like you watching and studying The Incredible Hulk, or is it something in college that you had
It's
studied?
more like I went back and studied it. Because as I got older, I got fascinated with it again. I'd seen it as a child and so forth. But then there's some things, I didn't watch it for a few years. And I watched it again, and I picked up on things as an adult I'd missed as a child.
As always happens.
Yeah, and there are some things in some of the performances. Bert Lahr is the Cowardly Lion. After Glinda makes it snow on the poppies, always have drugs in those kiddie movies. And they wake up and they're dancing their way off to the Emerald City. And you have those singers going in the background, that wonderful 30s ditty that they're doing. And he's suddenly looking around all over. Where are these voices coming from? I'm sure they didn't have playback on the set back when they produced this, but he's doing all this. He's thinking way ahead, and as an adult watching that, I'm cracking up.
Yeah, he had the forethought to know what they were going to add in post-production, so he's like,
Exactly.
Really placing yourself in the scene as the actor. That's nice. I haven't seen it in a really long time.
Apollo 13. Trying to think of
Tom Hanks?
the actor's name. No, not
Kevin
Tom
Bacon.
Hanks. Not the other one. Who was up there with them. When they've got the cassette player going in the capsule, he is bouncing his head in rhythm. Because he knew what the soundtrack was supposed to be. It's not playing back on the set. But he'd learned the rhythm, so he's matching this.
You also probably need like a decent enough director. Like if the actor's not thinking of it, you just need to okay, this is what's going on at the time, so roll with what that scene is.
Yes, and Ron Howard's brilliant. I don't know how they shot that. They were up in NASA's Vomit Comet, and you could shoot for 25 or 30 seconds at a time with zero gravity, and then the thing's coming down and you've got gravity again. Then it loops straight up, the plane goes up, and it's on that arc going over the top. You've got that zero gravity for maybe 30 seconds that they got to shoot in. And they did that all day long.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
That's a brave crew.
That's a brave crew, brave actors. Probably not for people scared of heights.
Or people, I guess, who get nausea fairly easily.
Yes. Yeah, that would not work too well. That's why they call it the Vomit Comet.
Right. So then you're definitely one of the more educated people that end up coming to the critique groups, at least from a literary standpoint, from a master's standpoint. Like for me, I have a degree I have a bachelor's in science.
Right.
It's not even a bachelor of arts. And then there's other people there that are coming in with their MFAs, or they're in the process of getting their MFAs. What have you been trying to learn through the classic collegiate way to get you to where you want to be?
That's shifted over the years. Originally, I started at the junior college. A semester after my class, I graduated a semester early, had the baby, did all of that. Came in a semester late, signed up as a business student, because I figured that was the way to make money. That was impacted, so I signed up for the journalism classes. A few years later, it's time to graduate, and I realize I have to change my major over to journalism because that's where all my units are. I never did switch back to business because I loved the writing, and I had the good fortune of being in one of the top 2 programs in the state, won awards after awards.
Which program was that?
At Fullerton College. This was in the late 70s and early 80s. Had an excellent program. I don't know what's happening there now, but I'm sure Larry is no longer the advisor.
I know a couple of our writers, at least from Long Beach, are going there currently, so it's got to be something.
I'm sure there is something going. And of course, the field has changed a great deal since then. Back then it was all print. There was no internet.
There's more to learn, I guess.
And it's different. And of course, a lot of things I learned, I got dressed down more than once by Larry, our advisor, for things I did as a cub reporter. And now I see people in the mainstream, national press even doing these things, and I'm aghast.
Doing what things? Dressing down?
No, but what they do when they're not checking their sources, or they're not, where they're throwing opinion in, or different. They're not checking. We've gone back to the days of yellow journalism, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and that's what people back in the early 2000s would hark on blogs. And people who had no J degrees of any kind, is they were doing this thing, and now they're trying to catch up to them.
They are. And the British tabloids, which we used to denounce for how they were, now I look a lot to foreign press to get American news because it's more objective. They don't have a stake in the outcome, at least not to the degree that we do. So it's interesting to catch these other perspectives, even though I know some of their papers and outlets lean different directions, and I'm aware of that. I mean, your adjectives will give it all away in no time at all.
Or sure. And then, like, if you're trying to get something from a British news source, as you had mentioned, they're all about no guns. So they're not, from their cultural perspective, the fact that we just have guns at all, it's mind-boggling to them. So so they're not really as objective, and they kind of don't understand where a lot of people are coming from. Not taking a stand one way or the other, just that there are 2 sides to this, and they can't see one of them.
Yes, and they can't theirs is one culture, ours is another. We separated several hundred years ago. And our path going across a wild continent that was not friendly at all, we grew to love our guns. We needed our guns. It was a matter of survival. And the people back in the 18th or 17th centuries had a very different existence on this continent than we have now. So we can't really judge them by our standards. You have to put yourself in their shoes.
Mm-hmm.
But we have that cultural ethic, and Davy Crockett and all these people have become cultural heroes. Certainly in the 20th century, Disney series and so forth. So, yeah, it's interesting to see the different takes on things, and a lot of it is usually just frame of reference.
So what did you do after journalism? Did you, because you had some writing in there, you had already had a script done. Were you just looking for grounds, whether you want to do fiction or nonfiction?
I mostly floundered.
Mostly floundered?
I mostly floundered.
Do you still flounder?
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
I think everybody does. And we have those times of great doubt. I became a single father when I was 23. I had very difficult times. But I went to Cal State Fullerton, and 2 years in a row I took the top award for student video. Did a couple of dramatic productions.
What were they? Exactly.
The two I did there, one was maybe 3 minutes long. I set it on a news set, which was easy in the little Titan studio that they had there. They probably have much better equipment now. But part of it was we would do newscasts and that sort of thing as we learned to work the cameras, the lights, the studio, all of that sort of thing. So I just used that basic setup of a student newscast of a student who had not passed all of her finals but was a newscaster and was on the verge of suicide.
Oh.
Which I called that one year-end final. And the other one, the next year, I did one based on, they didn't even have the name for it yet, but sexual harassment. I brought in an actor friend of mine that I know, and of a professor who is rather subtly, but still, it's sexual harassment.
Okay.
And the female student ends up strangling him at the end, which was a...
So like those microaggression sort of things?
Some of them. And it's a sort of, mostly things just from being ignorant, being too hands-on, to thinking you're doing one thing when really you're doing something else.
Sure,
not being
people
aware.
Being not self-aware at all.
Yeah, and he's a guy who's really not too self-aware, and she just gets a point, and I kind of stole from a couple of stories, which is what great artists do. I learned that. You steal. You don't borrow, you steal. There was a short story from Herman Hesse and one from Langston Hughes involving students and their instructors and things that happen, which had intrigued me. And I used some of those elements. And she gets into this kind of a trance as he's working to pull out these feelings from her because this one paper he thought was rather flat or something. But at the end, she just kills him, which surprised everyone watching, which was great. But I think what I was most proud was later the Women's Center used that for the new freshmen.
Oh, okay. So does that live on, I guess?
I don't know.
But at least for a little bit.
At least
a little bit it did.
This was in the late 80s, but for a time that lived on. I think that was probably... So it was actually doing good besides just my little surprise that I won. Oh, no, okay, it wasn't a surprise. I got enough of an ego.
You were still not quite past that
not
Bruce
quite
Banner
past
phase.
that, yeah. And at that point, I'd done some other work. I was very, very confident in what I was doing.
So when did it end up changing in you? I mean, you don't seem like you have that big of an ego to me anymore.
Well, one of the saints, and I'm paraphrasing here, it said that if you do not humble yourself, God will keep humbling you. I have found this to be true in my life. I have been humbled a great deal, and he's still humbling me. The bit about, okay, the Hulk got canceled. I know I wasn't ready. I'm thinking, I'm in my 50s now. I'm ready, okay? I think I can handle it at this point. But that's not mine to decide. The outcome of what I do is beyond my control. All I can do is my best work, and everything else is in God's hands.
And your best work that you have been working towards, you did the J School, you did those student films, and then you, from there, decided to get into what exactly?
Well, I went through a 5.5-year custody battle, and that destroyed my second marriage, and that's kind of when the whole bad boy thing started. Not that I viewed it that way at the time, but I kept trying to get back into school for years, and I did different things. I wrote a stage play. I got a staged reading once, but that didn't go too far. And that's about in the 90s I started doing the poetry. And what I found to be most important is to surround myself with other writers and with good mentors. My poetry picked up when I started attending and then somehow running a poetry group, which met every week, and I'm exposed to what people are doing, what I think they're doing right, what I think they're not doing right, what works and doesn't work. I guess right and wrong are not useful words in this case, but what I found to be work and what would work for me. And I started growing. And I also, when I did get back to school, I went to schools based on who I would study with. I went back to Cal State San Bernardino because they had B.H. Fairchild, magnificent poet, greatest living American poet, if you ask me. And I've been to readings with almost all of them.
B.H. Fairchild?
Yes. Magnificent, magnificent poet. An excellent reader as well. And I spent my time there studying with him right before he retired. Fabulous experience. That was an MFA experience, really, in poetry. Just terrific. And I don't think I ever would have gotten that Pushcart nomination without his influence, a lot of his advice, his critiques, his methodology for his approach to poetry. And then I went on to get my master's in professional writing at USC. And I went there for the single reason that they had Sid Field, who was the original screenwriting guru. And we sadly lost Sid a couple of years ago, which came as quite a shock, as I'd come to know him not just as a mentor, but as a friend.
Oh, yeah? Did you?
And
what happened?
Just one day he had a heart attack. Colin, he was young. He was in his 70s. He was still very active. There was no sign, no expectation. And that was shocking. But I went there and took on that student debt because for my screen work, I couldn't find anybody better than Sid Field. And I had to work to get into USC, and I had to work to get Sid as my thesis advisor. Because, of course, everybody wanted Sid Field as their thesis advisor.
Of course, you want the top dog.
He is the top dog in screenwriting, period. There are other gurus that have come along, and some of them very good, but he was. And I had the pleasure of working with him for several semesters, hands-on on my script, and that has done tremendous things, I think, for my writing and for my understanding of writing and how to critique a piece of writing. And I think having been surrounded by such good writers, and also there were other great writers in that program as well, and at San Bernardino, I actually had Brett Anthony Johnston, who now runs a writing program at Harvard for fiction. I have been fortunate to know and work with some of the greatest writers, editors, mentors, teachers in the field. And sometimes I just look in the mirror and go, that mug got to study with these people? Just incredible.
Oh, that's really great. So you mentioned critiquing in that before. How would you say that has influenced more specifically your approach to critiquing? I know Christine likes to call you the Simon Cowell of our group.
She does. And I think that's partly because I go in right to a lot of the technical parts of the craft that people are doing, and I don't always sugarcoat it. Now, unlike what happens on the TV shows, I never say, oh, that could kill a cat, or it sounded like a cat dying. No, I'm not going to insult the work,
sure,
let alone the writer of the work. And I do try to see how attached the person is to the work, how much they can handle in a critique. But I want to make the work better, and I also want to use it as a teaching opportunity. One of the things when I was in college, I have a friend who now teaches math. I am not a math guy. She is not an English person. We would help each other. I would go with my math and say, Daphne, I don't get this. And she'd go, oh, you just do this, this, this. I go, how on earth did you do that? And she'd have papers, and I go, oh, you just move this and do this, this. And she'd go, how did you do that? We had different strengths that were good for helping each other. As she was able to help me and I her, I want to do that with the other writers, to show them, if you just change this sentence this way, look how much stronger that is. Or if you move this POV from this character to that character, imagine the scene that way. You have to think about the small bits of the writing as well as the big bits. It's just like being a painter. When you go into a scene, they all add up. I love painting. One of my weaknesses is I can get online and just look at paintings for hours.
You really do have multiple things you like to work on. Yeah.
I can barely draw a stick figure, but I love
okay.
And how you frame your image. that you're going to put on that canvas, or as a photographer or whatever. That's so important. The lighting, the colors, all these different things that work into it, the style, they all form the whole, and they're inseparable from each other. And sometimes you have to be rather cold about what you're doing. What verb am I using? What noun? There's a better word for that. Sometimes you have to get that surgical about the writing. It's absolutely necessary. But not on the first draft. Never on the first draft. There it's all about story. Who is the character? What's the scene? Even a painter will go in, what am I trying to show here? Is it about the background? Is it about the character? What am I trying to pull out? I mean, what makes a great portrait artist so great is that you look and you feel like you know the person. It's not a mug shot. It's not just that you could recognize them on the street. It's that you get a feeling for who that person is. How do they do that? It's all the tricks of the trade. And they know how to use each one to create that sense. And it's the same with writing.
Oh, that's really fantastic way of looking at it, and I definitely think true. A lot of the writing pieces that I'm trying to learn through, a lot of these writing books I'm trying to learn through, they are picking out little pieces, because it's as much as a craft as it is a creative process.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so there's a lot to learn from, and then so you're taking that to the group, and I definitely appreciate what you've critiqued for me. I know it's been one of the things that have helped me out, in particular, certain pieces. I remember back.
But I'm sure there are other comments I've said. You go, no, that doesn't work for me, and that's fine. One thing I learned in critique groups is a lot of comments may be very useful, and a lot of them are not useful. I recognize they're viewing it from a certain place that isn't applicable to this work. And sometimes I know some people their comments are more useful than others, whether that's experience or that they see the vision, what I'm going for, better than some others do. Those are all various factors, but you don't have to take all the advice. And here's a dirty secret. You don't have to make all the changes the editor marks for you once you've got the book deal. Now, some editors are different. Some will want you to say why you didn't follow their advice on this or that. And others don't really care. Yeah, and that's your working relationship with them. But everybody's goal is to make the work better and stronger.
Absolutely.
And it's not, oh no, this is my baby. No, it's not your baby. This is the little pot you just made. Put it back on the wheel, or put the little painting of the urns and the Greeks on the side a little different. It's all about the work, not about the worker.
Exactly. So if people wanted to get your critiques now, they go over to Anaheim.
The Anaheim group on Tuesdays, or every other Thursday in Long Beach for the scriptwriters group.
Yes, okay, very much. Is there anything you'd like to promote before we get off this thing?
I don't have a new work that I'm pushing at the moment. I do have my workbook, 30 Points of Love. I'm holding it up to the mic, so just look at your speakers very carefully, which is a workbook for better relationships learned the hard way. And it's like a daily affirmation, one for each day of the month.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Jay. It's been a pleasure. Now I hope I can actually find my way home and not drive to Catalina.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. What did I tell you? Great guy with a lot of great advice he had to give. He told you where to see him. To see more of me, find me on Twitter. I am at J Bryan Jones. You can always see me at Coffee House Writers Group Long Beach. Find us on Meetup and at CHWG-PodcastSeries.org. Find us on Facebook.com/Coffeehouse Writers Group. You can find me at Facebook.com/Joel Bryan Jones. I will let you know why I go by Jay at a later podcast. One of these will be coming out every 2 weeks. Until then, go forth and create.